Hello, everybody. My name is Nanika Edwards. I am a poet from Trinidad and Tobago. Today, I'm going to share an example of how a poem can be analyzed. It's actually not as daunting as it may seem, and I have selected a very short poem, so this is not going to take long. And I'll show you how I would typically analyze a poem. This is one of my own poems, so, well, not entirely neutral. I'll have to find some other poems that I haven't written to give an example of how I would analyze something that I haven't written, but this is still a good example to start off with. Okay, so first of all, the first thing that I look at is the title, royalty. And when I see royalty, I'm expecting that the poem will probably be about a king or a queen or a prince or princess or emperor, empress, some type of royalty, right? Okay, so then for this particular poem, we see that the first two lines are italicized. That is, the first two lines are in italics or italics, meaning that the letters are a little slanted. They're not standing straight up. I usually do this when I want to include a short introduction, usually a short introduction for a poem that is not necessarily part of the main poem. So the lines in italics say, "The last in line shall be first in rain and shine. The last in line shall be first in rain and shine." So what draws my attention here is that, first of all, these two lines rhyme. Line rhymes with shine, and they are what you call perfect rhymes. Sometimes with poetry, you may have what are called half rhymes when you don't get an exact rhyme. For example, line and shine are exact rhymes, but line and rhyme, even though they rhyme, are not exact rhymes. They're not exact rhymes because one is ein and one is I'm. So they're not exact rhymes, even though they're rhymes. But in this case, line rhymes with shine. So it's an exact rhyme. And that is a cue for me that it's possible, probably, this poem is going to be a rhyming poem. That's a good cue that this poem, what follows after those two lines, is probably going to be a rhyming poem. What's the other thing that catches my eye? The last in line shall be first in rain and shine. Well, the next thing that catches my attention is the pun, rain and shine. And, typically rain should have been spelled RAIN, but it's spelled REIGN, as in the reign of a king or a queen, the reign of royalty. And of course, that will remind me of the title, royalty, right? So already I'm seeing, okay, this really is about royalty, some type of royalty. But these first two lines are giving me a clue about what the poem is going to be about. And these first two lines are also designed to stir some degree of curiosity within the reader, because you're thinking, the last in line will be first in rain and shine? That's unusual. The last in line. And for people who are familiar with the Bible, you may be reminded of the scripture that says that the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So this is, I guess you could call it an allusion. Uh, um, yes, an allusion to that particular scripture reference. And so in those two lines, we have a lot of things happening. We've got the rhyme, line with shine, which is a cue or a clue that what follows may rhyme. And then we also have a pun, rain and shine. Rain is the pun, rain, because it should really be spelled RAIN if we were typically saying this. But rain is connected to the title. And finally, the last in line shall be first in rain and shine is designed to make the reader think, what could this poem be about? And I also should point out that there are two examples of alliteration in these first two lines. Can you spot them? I don't know if you've seen my videos about alliteration. If you haven't, you can check them out. They're in the Poetic Devices section of my YouTube channel, Nanika Edwards. Anyway, yes, in the first line, last goes together with line. That's an example of alliteration, right? Where you have two consonant sounds, initial sounds, meaning the sound is at the start of a word, and when it comes to alliteration, these words come in close succession, right? So they're close to each other. Last and line separated by one little word with one syllable. So this is an example of alliteration because last and line are close to each other. And then in the second line, we have shall be first in rain and shine. So the two sounds are kind of an example of alliteration. They're a little far from each other because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in between, one syllable each. So 5 syllables in between those two words, but still kind of close enough that you could call that an example of alliteration. Okay, I don't know if you spotted anything else there that I might have missed, because even though I'm the poet and I'm the one who wrote this, you may spot things that I did not intentionally pen into this poem, which is fine because poetry is really poetry is really designed to be a symbiotic experience. The poet writes something, and then the reader may see all kinds of things that the poet did not intentionally pen into the poem, but that would be valid once the reader can justify their opinion or their perspective. So that's what poetry is like. So don't feel that this is a hard and fast thing where you must figure out exactly what the poet intended. No, not necessarily. Poetry is a wonderful poetry offers a wonderful opportunity to develop critical thinking skills, because even if you as a reader see something in a poem that the poet himself or herself may not have seen, but that you can justify, that's perfectly fine. The important thing is, and the key thing is, you have to be able to justify it. It should be rational. You can't just say, well, it's a poem and how I experience it is how I experience it. No, it has to be logical. A lot of people think that the arts are not logical. The arts are supposed to be logical, even if you're talking about imagination and creativity and things like that, there's still a lot of logic that goes into it. Okay, let's get on to the next, to the main portion of the poem, which is 4 lines. A hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. So when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings, it is king. Okay, so um, first of all, um, when I read a poem like this, even though it's really short, I would probably read it about twice or 3 times well, just to suck everything out of it, just to extract all of the meaning, all of the beauty, all of the clever devices that would have been used to construct something like this. So even though it's short, a lot of craftsmanship has gone into this little poem, this little gem of a poem. Okay, so let's go through line by line. A hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. Okay, so now we know what the poem is actually about. It's not about a king, or not a literal king, not about a literal queen. It's about a hummingbird. Okay, a hummingbird. And a hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. And of course, we can connect this back to the first 2 lines, that the last in line shall be first in rain and shine. So the least will be greatest and the greatest will be the least, right? So the hummingbird is the smallest bird known to planet Earth, as far as we know. I don't know if there's some species that is yet to be discovered, but so far, as far as we know, the hummingbird is the smallest bird out of all the bird species, right? So a hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. Now, gem. Gem might make us think of royalty, because royals have gems. Royals tend to have a lot of precious stones, whether it's in their crown or in their scepter or on their throne, or, in their collection of jewelry. Royalty tends to be associated with gemstones. So that's a subtle little thing, a subtle linking of the hummingbird with the idea of royalty right there in the first main line. Okay, let's go to the next line. So when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, so when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, all right, so thing and sings are, you could call it a half rhyme, because one ends with an S and one doesn't, but they do rhyme. So when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings, it is king, right? So we see that those 4 lines rhyme, right? The 4 lines rhyme. They are like, you could call them half rhymes, but if you could also look at it from a slightly different perspective. The first line and the 4th line of that main section are complete rhymes. They're full rhymes. They're perfect rhymes. And the 2 lines in the middle, the second and the third line, are also perfect rhymes, right? But all 4 lines essentially rhyme. The second line, so when it takes flight and blurred humming sings. right? So blurred humming. Blurred humming refers to the fact that when the hummingbird beats its wings, they beat super fast. I think, as far as I know, probably the fastest flitting of wings on the planet known to the Avarian species, right? So Avarian meaning birds, a bird of the of bird species, right? So blurred humming refers to the speed at which the hummingbird beats its wings, which is, as far as I know, what gives it that incredible ability, that amazing ability to hover like a helicopter around a flower, around a plant, to sip on the nectar that the plant or the flower may be offering. So when it takes flight and blurred humming sings. So for people who are familiar with hummingbirds, when you read that second line, you would realize that the blurred humming is pointing to the fact that the hummingbird can hover, which is something I don't know if any other birds can do that. I'm not so sure that other birds do that, like just hovering on the spot, flying at the same time. And the hummingbird can do many other incredible things while it's flying. It can sip nectar upside down. It can fly backwards. It's really an amazing little creature, right? So when it takes flight, it can do a lot of amazing things, right? Even though it's such a small creature. Richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings. Richly crowned. Okay, so richly crowned with the sun. So richly crowned takes us back to the title, royalty. It is crowned because I, as a poet, am saying that this bird is like royalty. Richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings. Okay, so crowned with the sun means that when the sun catches its plumage, its iridescent plumage, it looks like it's glittering. It could look like it's glittering. So we can go back to the first line. We could go back to the first line, look at that word gem, consider the word gem, and contemplate the fact that the hummingbird, because of its iridescent plumage, looks as if it's covered with gemstones. You know, imaginatively speaking, you could say that. Sometimes I like to think that in the Garden of Eden, maybe the hummingbird was really covered with gems and jewels. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings, right? So wings, wings meaning to fly, as it glittering flies. It is king. It is king. Okay, so now it is king takes us right back to the title of the poem. Now that we have all of these different lines coming together, from the introductory lines to the main four lines, we can understand why this poem is called Royalty. What I would notice is that, if I were reading this poem and I hadn't written it myself, one of the things that I would notice is that the last line is abruptly short. You have three long lines preceding it, and then the fourth line is very short. That is the effect that creates is a sense of drama, a sense of finality, and even a sense of emphasis, even though it's shorter than the other lines. It creates a dramatic effect. And it is almost very like a very finite, not finite. It's like a very strong declaration, even though it's much shorter than the three lines that precede it. And when I, as a reader, if I hadn't written this poem, if I see that the last line is suddenly very short, I would know that the poet did that deliberately. That the poet was trying to create some kind of effect, right? Um, so that is royalty. And let me read it through one more time just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Although when I read it again, I may miss something that you would notice. You may notice something that I myself am about to miss, but let's see. Royalty by Nanika Edwards. Yours truly. The last in line shall be first in rain and shine. A hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. So, when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings, it is king. And by the way, you have to know how to read a poem, even if you haven't written it. That's something that comes naturally to some people, and for others, you may need to just practice a bit. But the more you practice, is the more that you will become a natural at it, right? So, understanding how to read a poem can also help with understanding. Because sometimes what people do is they'll read a poem with no expression, like this: royalty. The last in line shall be first in rain and shine. A hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. So when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings, it is king. Do you see the difference there? You don't get the sense of drama. You don't get the excitement of the poet. You don't get any kind of emotion. Poetry is a very emotive art form. It's like a capsule of emotion, all in. It's like a whole lot of emotion poured into a little capsule. That's what a poem is, right? More so than prose. A poem is like everything you would get in prose, but concentrated. Okay? So it's really important to be able to read a poem properly, because that too will help with understanding, or at least it will show that you understand what you're reading and how you've interpreted it. So let me read that one last time. And yes, this is what I do when I read poetry, especially if it's a short poem. I would probably read it about two, three, sometimes 4 or 5 times through. However many times I feel like reading something, especially if it really spoke to me, or if I thought it was really clever, I would read it many times over. Okay, and that's a good thing to do because poetry is so densely meaningful, or so densely crafted, that it can be very easy to miss things if you just read it once. So let's read it one more time through. Royalty. The last in line shall be first in rain and shine. A hummingbird is the teeniest gem of a thing. So, when it takes flight and blurred humming sings, richly crowned with the sun as it glittering wings, it is king. Right? So, by the way, this is a good example of a beautifully written poem that doesn't have any deep, deep, deep intrinsic meaning to it. It's really just literally describing a hummingbird. But you know what? Somebody else may see something more in this that means something special to them. For example, A child might look at this and say, you know what? I may be small in the human kingdom. I may be the little one, but I'm like a hummingbird. I'm like a hummingbird. I have a lot of energy, just like a little hummingbird. Um, my imagination glitters with all kinds of gemstone ideas. Um, my mind is always buzzing, like the sound that a hummingbird's wings make. Um, I am the least, but Jesus said that the last will be first, and the first will be last, and that the children, that for people to come into the kingdom of God, they have to become like me, like a little child. So we could see all kinds of things in this, and somebody else may see something else. But me as a poet, I could tell you all I was doing was describing a hummingbird. A poem does not have to be full of special, deep, profound meaning to be a beautifully written poem or to be a finely crafted poem. No, you could just have something like this describing something beautiful but done with such masterful penning or with such masterful joining of words to form phrases and sentences, almost like a jeweler taking um, taking gemstones and connecting them with gold or silver and then creating these beautiful patterns. That's what this particular poem is like and what all poems are like. But some poems may be very, very deep and you could spend like hours, probably hours, days discussing all the ins and outs of a particular poem. Whereas something like this is just meant for, what is it like? It's kind of like a rich chocolate in a whole box of chocolates. This is what this poem is like. So I hope that this was useful for you. Just remember that with poetry, because the economy of words is so important, a really good poet does not waste words. Every poet, every word is important. So if a word jumps out at you, it's jumping out for a reason. Um, it's important to focus on patterns in the poem, like, royalty. What points to royalty in this poem? You have the word rain, you have gem, you have richly crowned, you have glittering, you have king, right? So you look for patterns in the wording and the adjectives and so on, and you just try to find clues. Understanding a poem, analyzing a poem is like doing detective work, like looking for clues that can help you put a whole picture together, a whole picture, where you're solving the mystery of what's in the poet's mind that they are not just spelling out for you plain and simple like you would in a piece of prose. So that's it. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for hitting the like button. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, and if you'd like to get notifications, then please subscribe. Until next time.